Woke up this morning, you probably were met with a barrage of anti-Chinese headlines in the mainstream media, the corporate media. And whenever I see a sort of a coordinated effort on different headlines by mainstream publications, I'm always a little skeptical, a little cynical. The cynical bastard in me pops out. So let me just run through a quick number of these here. The Wall Street Journal reports that Chinese spies are infiltrating the U.S. military bases by asking for a Burger King. That's a weird story. We'll unpack that. China is said to be readying to conduct military exercises with Russia and North Korea in response to the U.S. conducting military exercises in South Korea. And then this Huawei phone story. This is pretty amazing. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Huawei introducing a brand new smartphone, but how in the world did they pull that off? Given the fact that there's massive amounts of U.S. sanctions. Did they find a loophole here? So to unpack all of this and about all these China headlines simultaneously, we wanted to bring in Carl Zha to discuss this and break this all down. Carl, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Hi, Clayton. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So let's start with the phone thing, because that seems to be like a simple entry point here. The Wall Street Journal, this Huawei story, that's all, everyone's in a rage about this, that they can get a new Huawei phone. But how in the world they are able to pull this off? The Wall Street Journal, the U.S. seems to be shocked that Chinese basically avoided U.S. sanctions, were able to create one of the best smartphones in the world. How do they do this?
Exactly. It's no secret that U.S. is trying to kill Huawei for a long time. They had sanctions on Huawei. They had arrested the Huawei founder's daughter, Meng Wanzhou. They had her arrested in Canada, put her under house arrest for busting Iran sanctions. And I think that the trigger is when the Huawei moved to the 5G technology. That really freaked the U.S. government out, because Huawei has been building out telecom networks all across the world. Here I am sitting in Bali, Indonesia. We are using the 4G network that's built by Huawei. But when Huawei moved on to 5G, U.S. decided that's not acceptable. They actually stopped their allies like United States, like UK and UK, Canada, Australia, all the Five Eyes countries using Huawei. One of their excuse is national security, because the U.S. intelligence agencies, they have a back door to all the telecom networks. But their concern if Huawei start to build these telecom networks in UK, in Germany, in Australia, not only U.S. intelligence agency won't able to get a backdoor, but they think, well, then the Chinese government will get a backdoor. So that's not acceptable for them. So this is why they push for the Huawei ban. But it did not stop there, because they also asked, before the Huawei 5G phone, for example, they require U.S. components. For example, Qualcomm. They need the Qualcomm design chips that's manufactured on Taiwan by the TSMC. The U.S. have told Qualcomm, no, you can't sell to Huawei. And it tells the TSMC on Taiwan, no, you cannot sell to Huawei. So Huawei's phone business actually died for a couple of years because they're not able to get the chips. They were able to design domestically a chip to replace the Qualcomm chip, but they still don't have the manufacturing capability to actually making the chips. So like 90% of the world advanced semiconductor chip are the orders sent to Taiwan, and TSMC make them. And then Huawei cannot even, and TSMC, the semiconductor manufacturing is very complex process with very diversified global chains. For example, the TSMC, they also depend on other technology to make the chips. They depend on this machine called the EUV machine, the extreme ultraviolet lithography machine that use lasers to etch this like very small, tiny transistors on semiconductors. And so U.S. also asked Netherlands government to ban the Netherlands company ASML, stopping to send those machines to China. So even Huawei want to make those chips themselves using the ASML machines, they couldn't. So it's quite a shock when Huawei came out with this phone. So how they did it is there's two type of machines that ASML makes. One is called the DUV machine. It's called the deep ultraviolet machine, and the other one called the EUV machine, the extreme ultraviolet machine. The DUV is older technology, and that's why it's not on the sanction list yet. So ASML can still sell to Huawei DUV machine at least until beginning of 2024. So Huawei is buying them in bulk. And what they have figured out is there was a process to make 7-nanometer chips using those older technology DUV machines. Taiwan actually figured out back in 2017, but it's an older technology, older method. It's not as efficient as using the DUV machines, but Huawei has no choice because they don't have access to ASML's latest UV machines. So they were able to replicate the process that TSMC used to make the 7-nanometer chips using the older DUV machines, but they were able to produce at a commercial scale. So people probably don't realize this. China spent $400 billion on chip imports before the U.S. chip ban. China spent more on chip imports than they spent importing oil. So now all that money is not coming to the United States. All that money is not going to the United States, not going to Netherlands, not going to Taiwan. Or that $400 billion now going to research and development to make China's own indigenous method of manufacturing chips. So that's why they had this breakthrough. They will still have faced a little bit of headwind because now latest iPhone is using like 3-nanometer chips from Taiwan. And to make that, you need the UV machines. I think China will eventually get it. Maybe it takes them 5 years. But for Huawei, it's a big breakthrough for the end consumers. They don't care whether you have 7-nanometer chips or 3-nanometer chips. As long as you provide the functionality, they're happy. And Huawei is able to do that.
Let's talk about this Wall Street Journal story also about Chinese spies infiltrating U.S. military bases and coming in and asking for a Burger King. And then also these military exercises. They're supposed to be teaming up with Russia on these joint military exercises as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is set to travel to Russia via an armored train. That is the report today. So it seems that relationship is growing even more strong. What do you say about these Chinese spies infiltrating U.S. military bases? Angle. What do you know of this story?
Well, I hope they caught them. I mean, I read the report. It's very vague. They say there have been instances of Chinese tourists or claiming they're tourists trying to run past military installations looking for their hotel. So, if they're spies, I hope they caught them, prosecuted them, charged them. But the report didn't say, how many people were charged, arrested, or convicted. Yeah. It's just an anonymous official dropping this tip to Wall Street Journal saying that these are instances of Chinese tourists gate crashing, and they call it the gate crashers, and they said this is a very increasing phenomenon. So first of all, U.S. is liable. All these people protecting U.S. military sites are liable to keep those secret sites off limits to outsiders. So I hope they're doing their job. But what I think they're really doing is spreading the story in United States at the time when U.S. and China are trying to restore the people-to-people exchange after COVID, because now they're Gina Raimondo was in Beijing. One of the things she talked about was they're going to increase the travel between United States and China back to the pre-COVID levels and get more Chinese tourists to come to United States. It seems to me some people don't want that to happen. Some people don't like the increased people-to-people exchange, and they would rather keep that to the minimum. I mean, that's why we're seeing these stories right now. This is my take.
Also, I've had sources telling me over the weekend that they've seen real trouble in China, and I want to get your assessment of what's happening in the Chinese economy, because if the Chinese economy collapses, it's going to have massive reverberations around the world. And the photos that I'm seeing and sources that I'm hearing from who were in China this past week saying it's in many ways unrecognizable to them. In Shanghai, for instance, I'm just going to share some photos here. They say normally going to Western restaurants, American-style restaurants, Starbucks, et cetera, is a bit of a status symbol thing to do. I don't know if that's correct or not, but in Shanghai, going to a Starbucks or going to these different restaurants, and many of them are empty, closed. Walking around on a Sunday or on a Monday in Shanghai looks like a Sunday in Germany. I've heard it described, where there's very little traffic, very few people sort of wandering markets and foot traffic. So there are suggestions that the Chinese economy is in real trouble. What do you say about that?
So first of all, I saw that tweet. It's by reporter Michael Yong. Said his friend sent him that pictures.
Mhm.
So some people pointed out that the area that they took the photo at is Lujiakou. It's a place that rarely gets a lot of traffic normally anyway on a Monday, and because that was like a tourist area. And as for
Okay.
Western restaurant, it's true that Western restaurant was a status going to Western restaurant was a status symbol in Shanghai 15 years ago. It's true.
Oh, okay.
It was true 15 years ago. So it's not so much true today.
So going to like a TGI Fridays is not a great status symbol anymore.
No. Maybe back in 2000, but
Yeah.
but China. There's a lot of people right now. There's a lot of expats now heading back to China after the COVID restriction had been lifted. People can go look on YouTube their travels in Shanghai to see, to see for firsthand experience what it's like. But having said that, China's economy is in real trouble. It is actually slowing down. Has been the most serious slowdown in China for decades, and that this is true, including the high unemployment number for the youth from 16 to 24 age group. That's all true. This is one reason is because China is shifting away from the real estate driven investment, which has been driving the Chinese economy growth for decades. But it cannot go on forever because we know how real estate bubble ended up in the United States back in 2008, and this is why that China is going through a hard time transitioning right now. But I think it's a cyclical downturn. It's not a secular downturn. From my conversation with my friends and families in China, everybody is doing fine. The tourism right now is actually not letting down. There's a lot of domestic tourists, but they're slowing. The real estate developers are in trouble in China. A lot of them are going bankrupt. So that's going to create a drag for the economy. And this is also driven so some people running away from China to United States. So I'm sure some people have heard about Chinese refugees coming to US because Chinese economy is going through a hard time right now. That is true.
Yeah, I had a friend in Beijing saying that they've noticed a lot of small businesses troubled and closed. He lives and works there. He is Chinese, and says that is the case. That there is some real troubling signs there, especially among young people as well. So, again, I'm really, of course, I think we're all worried about what happens with a massive Chinese slowdown, and when consumers in the United States are also knee deep in credit card debt. They're not buying. You're under this massive weight of sanctions. And so what can Americans buy at these massively increased prices? This could have massive implications around the globe if we see a massive Chinese slowdown. So, yeah, I am worried about it. I am absolutely worried about it. Do you think we will see some sort of normalization of trade with the United States and maybe greener pastures soon to come?
So Gina Raimondo just in Beijing recently, and she basically said, look, we're not going to budge on this U.S. sanction on the high-tech sectors, because that's national security reasons, but we are still willing to sell China the other less sophisticated goods. She was literally hawking like U.S. domestic cosmetic products in Beijing. I think that's a message Gina Raimondo was sent there to convey. They will still continue business with China outside of those high-tech sector restrictions. Now, does that mean that there's going to be a restoration of ties? I don't know. The decoupling, they have been returning it, de-risking. It is happening. Decoupling is already happening. For example, we already talked about the semiconductors, but even, U.S. have been pressuring multinationals to move their supply chain outside of China. So but in the last few years, interesting fact about the trade statistics, the U.S. imports from the rest of the world keep on going up, but the Chinese export to United States is going down. So the rise in U.S. imports is coming from countries like Mexico and Vietnam. But if you look at the trade between China with Vietnam and Mexico, they're going skyrocketing. So what's
Right.
really happening is all these Chinese goods now get exported to Vietnam and Mexico for the final assembly. So they get slapped on made in Mexico and made in Vietnam
Right.
and re-exported to the United States. And U.S. consumer just pay premium, that adds to the inflation.
Well, and the U.S. consumer can say, yeah, I don't get my stuff from China. Nike can say, yeah, we don't do our stuff in China anymore. Well, yeah, they do, but it's just done by proxy in Vietnam and in the Philippines and other spots. But it's still basically coming from China. This is the shell game that they play here. So, well. Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you for helping us to unpack some of these headlines here, especially around the military spies invasion, as well as, well, I guess I didn't ask you here, but I'll get you out of here on this, Carl, which is on the military exercises, the Chinese and joint Russian military exercises. What do you make of that?
Right. So to related note, to talk about all the spy, including spy bloom and all that, people seem to forget we live in the age of satellites. The Chinese Beidou system have 45 active satellites in the sky, where the GPS only have 31 active satellites. I listened to a Taiwan journalist, Paul Wang, on the Manifold podcast a few weeks ago. Paul Wang said, any Taiwanese ballistic missile site, they will have a Chinese satellite flying over it every 20 minutes. So, do Chinese really need to fly a slow as balloon across America? Okay. So, right. That aside, China and so Russia and North Korea has been getting closer because Russia is looking to source more weapons, conventional weapons from North Korea for their war effort, which is understandable because I was in Russia late June during the Prigozhin coup. Wow. One thing about Moscow, what I see is not a society that's mobilized for war. I mean, people who have seen my travel logs on my YouTube channel will see that. They will say, oh, this doesn't look like a country at war, which is true because Putin is calling this a special military operation because he's trying to do it with minimum disruption to average people's life. So this is why the Russian industry haven't really geared up for like a total war situation. So this is why they're looking to North Korea to source more weapons, conventional weapons, and North Korea has nothing to lose. They're already sanctioned by the United States. U.S. can't sanction North Korea anymore. But for the military exercise, China and Russia has been conducting the joint naval exercise in the Sea of Japan, and recently they just sailed across Alaska through the Aleutian Island chain. And now there's talk about North Korea will join the two to do a trilateral patrol. This is in response to a recent U.S. military drill with South Korea. So now we are seeing two blocks shaping up in East Asia. We have the trilateral alliance between U.S., Japan, and South Korea on one side, and the other side we have China, Russia, and North Korea. So we live in interesting times, Clayton.
Yeah, we certainly do. And it's going to be interesting to see Europe's response in all of this, which is a place, that is on the verge of energy crisis as we enter in this winter period as well. So very interesting. Carl Zhao, thank you so much for joining us here. Great to catch up with you. And thanks for diving into a bunch of these headlines today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you for inviting me.
So our thanks to Carl. We really appreciate it. And I would just want to say thanks to all of you for subscribing to the show, which is totally free. We'll just, if you're on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button. And on Rumble as well, you can follow us there and subscribe. And my thanks to all of you for sharing the show. I ran into a viewer this weekend who said he loves the show. He's from France. And he said he shares the show to all of his family and friends and on a regular basis. He said he's not sure if they're ready to hear it or not, but he still does that. And so I just want to say thanks to all of you that do share our segments out with people who might be sort of under the control of the corporate media still, the people that are still watching CNN and they're still watching the mainstream media. So my thanks to all of you for doing that. And we will be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, everyone, have a great night.